We did try to borrow somewhat from financial services when we were envisioning Nemo on our broader fraud mitigation and misrepresentation mitigation framework. KYC, know your customer principles, real-time transaction monitoring throughout the life cycle of a project and engaging with our experts, behavioral analytics, all of those industries, obviously in financial services, learned decades ago that kind of point in time checks aren't enough and that continuous monitoring is the standard. So we did seek to apply that logic to our AI data operations. I think why this is a bit different from kind of traditional is, traditional QA, for example, or validation is designed to catch errors in output, and Nemo is really intended to secure the environment in which the output is produced, which is kind of a fundamentally, we think, different approach. And, again, as I mentioned, the human layer is not necessarily a point of failure. It's an extremely important part in AI model development. We think, of course, we believe that that is where the most value is created. And we think then that that means it's worth protecting that value. The same qualities that make our human experts, our contributors, irreplaceable in model development, and that's judgment, nuance, domain expertise, cultural insight. That's also something and contributions that are kind of vulnerable to bad actors impersonating or exploiting.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the LLM builders are actually pulling in expertise and
Yes.
really human experts. I heard about OpenAI trying to take down Wall Street with 400, kind of Wall Street types coming in and sharing all their knowledge. How do you actually validate that Nemo's working and it's not just catching more activity, but catching the right activity?
No, absolutely. And plus one to what you just said. I mean, before there can be artificial intelligence, there must be human intelligence, and many of our customers, like ourselves, have recognized that that human expertise is essential in creating differentiated, sort of models that perform in an extraordinary way. So, sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, the how do you validate that Nemo's working and not just catching kind of more activity, but catching the right activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a work in progress. We have data that indicates that it is working, and we benchmark ourselves pretty rigorously. In terms of the signals or the data that we do use, so we have at current count we have a little over 130 unique behavioral variables that we monitor per session. So they're based on things like timing patterns, interaction signatures, cross-session consistency, other anomalies that might suggest behaviors like account sharing or coordinated activities are occurring. We try to, and we're pretty rigorous about looking at the full picture of contributor behavior, not just the final output. And then we deploy that framework across the entire life cycle. So talent sourcing, candidate selection, live production. And that is kind of a combination of rules-based and AI-driven, proprietary, of course, framework. That's very intentional as well. We know that rules-based logic handles known threat patterns really efficiently. And the AI-driven layer is what we have found allows us to detect novel and evolving patterns. And that is important because bad actors, threat actors do adapt. They evolve, of course, quite quickly. And we know that a static detection system will eventually be outpaced. And then I think the last piece, which allows us to keep pace with and hopefully stay ahead of and mitigate risk in active pipelines, is behavioral psychology. So we do have organizational psychology team within our fraud mitigation organization. I think that this piece is a somewhat underappreciated dimension of the problem. Understanding human motivations and behavioral markers behind fraud makes our ability to detect it significantly more accurate than just purely technical signal analysis. And then, obviously the overall intent to answer your question is to kind of stop threats before they get to the model. That's the design intent that we have. Because we really focus consistently on the security perimeter upstream before the data is produced, not after, but then we continue that rigor through the end of the data set development process. And because we do self-audit and we provide that audit data to our clients, if that is something that they're interested in, we're able to kind of benchmark our activities, our operational framework, and identify opportunities to improve.